Hello, it's Katie again. We're going to be talking about barriers for dual diagnosis today. My name is Catherine Mullins. I have been employed with PeerStar for about the past year and a half. I got my MBA from Walden University, my bachelor's in behavioral sciences from the Mount, and I have my associate's degree in depth studies from the Mount as well. I've been working in the field for the past 15 years in all types of capacities, but mainly focused on intellectual disabilities. So some of the things that executive functioning is responsible for, and especially in their everyday tasks, would be emotional control, focusing or paying attention, starting new tasks, staying on task, understanding different perspectives or viewpoints, organizing and prioritizing, such as tasks and goals, keeping track of what you're doing, and impulse control. So basically, if you think about executive functioning in this aspect, it is like your filter. It takes all the information from the rest of your brain, the left side of your brain, the right side of your brain, what you're seeing in the back of your brain, and it goes into the front of your brain, the frontal cortex, where the executive functioning is held. And we process that information, and then it comes out to either a thought, emotion, a task, whatever we're doing at the moment, or whatever we're saying. So executive functioning is actually responsible for a lot of the stuff that we do. So like I said, executive functioning is all in the frontal cortex of your brain, and that is the front hemisphere of your brain. It is right above your eyes, and it is right behind your forehead. It is actually considered to be the most important part of your brain because it kind of takes everything into account and processes it and makes sense of everything. So when we see a brain injury to the frontal cortex, or we see someone with an intellectual disability, we see limited executive functioning skills because of this stuff. The executive functioning is responsible for the organization of tasks, and that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today, because when it comes to peer support, what we're doing is we're helping somebody execute a goal. Whatever that goal may be. And in order to do a goal, you must have the organization of tasks to do so. Now, when you're working with someone with an intellectual disability or a dual diagnosis, we do see that they struggle with these next 6 steps. So we're going to kind of go over these 6 steps, and then I'm going to give you an example of what that would look like so that you can kind of envision what these tasks all do. So the first one's analyzation, the second planning, third organizing, 4 developing timelines, 5 adjust if needed, and then 6 complete the task. So the example that I always give is me getting ready in the morning. It's super simple. It's something that we do every day. But I put these 6 steps into that day so that you can kind of see what I mean. So for me to get ready in the morning, I have to analyze actually the night before. What am I doing the day? Am I traveling? Am I training? And that's just kind of me trying to figure out what I need to get ready. So that's the analyzation part. The planning part actually is the night before again, but I start trying to figure out, do I need anything to take with me? Should I pack my bags? Do I need to get training materials ready? Do I need to have my laptop charged? And that kind of goes with that analyzation, kind of doing both at the same time. The organizing part is putting everything together. So I've already thought about it. I've planned it all out. I know what I need to bring. Now I just need to put it all together. So I need to get my backpack and I need to put my laptop in there, my charger, all of my stuff for trainings, and make sure that I am ready for the next day. My developing timelines is very important as well. I need to figure out what time I'm getting up, what time I'm showering, what time I'm letting my dog out, and then I need to figure out what time I need to get on the road in order for me to be on time or early. I like to be a little early. So I develop those timelines usually the night before as well, because I'm setting my alarm for the next day and making sure I have enough time for getting ready. The 5, adjust if needed. This is probably the hardest one, even for us. Think about your everyday life and you're getting ready in the morning and something happens. The coffee machine breaks. The dog runs away. Happens. Your husband jumps in the shower before you. Again, happens. So we kind of have to adjust our schedule or whatever we're doing at the time in order to still complete that task. So I might have to adjust my timeline. I might have to adjust what I'm bringing that day. I might have to go chase my dog down the neighborhood. You just never really know. And then completing the task itself. You know, I got ready, I got in the car, and I got to the destination that I needed to get to. So that was me completing one task that day. When you're working with somebody with an intellectual disability, what we see with their executive functioning is they do struggle with either one, some, or all of these. And so as peer support specialists, this is really important for you to know because this is where you could help support them. So if you know that they struggle with the analyzation and planning part of executive functioning, you could then help step in and say, okay, let's plan it together. Let's analyze what you need together. Let's talk about it and then come up with a plan. Or if you know, hey, I know you really struggle with timelines, let's sit down, let's do a timeline together so that we know what we need to be doing and when. I will tell you that number 5, not only do we struggle with, but individuals that have an intellectual disability or dual diagnosis do struggle with the adjusting. They have what's called cognitive rigidity at times, and that just means that they kind of get stuck. So if something happens or, you know, they say a wrench was thrown into the plan, they tend to get stuck there. They're not sure how to complete that task. So let's say the same thing's happening. They're getting ready and their dog runs away. You know, to them, that's going to be really hard to come back from. Even if they do get the dog back in the house and they're getting ready still, they're going to have some sort of issue throughout the day where, you know, it made them late and then they're kind of thrown off. So that adjusting is extremely hard, and it does take practice to become really well versed at that. So that's not unusual to see. So some tips that we have for executive functioning, use some visual aids, you know, if that would help clue them into what they need to be doing. Use aids such as calendars, picture tasks, and schedules. Reminders on the phone to do tasks, so remember to look at the aids that you have set up. Plan for extra time to plan or organize. Do one step at a time, and that is very key when you're working with someone with a dual diagnosis. It is very helpful to do one thing at a time and maybe have reminders that continually repeat that reminder. Have brainstorming time or discussion time to organize. Like I said on the previous page, you know, we want to help them where they're at. So if they really struggle with the organization, you know, we can help them with that part. And then talk through the planning process. You know, that just might be something that they need to do before they even start the task itself. Processing speed. So when we talk about someone that has an intellectual disability or dual diagnosis and executive functioning, we do have to talk about processing speed. It's how fast you take in the information and how fast you can process it. Some individuals with an intellectual disability do have issues with the speed in which they process information. Some process information at a slower rate. Some process information in different ways, so maybe they see it rather than hearing it. And then some cannot process complex information. Saying things too fast or in fast sequence can sometimes pose an issue for someone with an intellectual disability. I struggle with that. I talk really fast because I like to talk. So just being mindful of that and slowing it down a little bit when you're working with someone with a dual diagnosis is extremely helpful. Multi-step processes can sometimes be too complex, so we try to break it down. We try to do one step at a time, make sure that they're still with you, continue to try it over and over again. Repetition is key, and then you move on to the next step. Some other tips that we could go over: slow down your speech, which is pretty normal. Use visual aids if needed. Provide information one step at a time. Check in with the individual on how they're doing, and make the learning process tailored to that individual. And I would always try to get to know your person. You're not going to know right off the bat what their processing speed is, or their executive functioning skills, or where maybe they need some extra support. But once you do get to know that person, then you can kind of start putting in like a puzzle piece. You are the puzzle piece. You're just going to help when maybe they need a little boost, or they aren't sure, or they get stuck. So the next barrier we're going to go over is communication barriers. Communication barriers are the obstacles that prevent us from receiving and understanding language or communication. A communication barrier can be anything that prevents someone from understanding what is being said, signed, or written. People with an intellectual disability do have communication barriers at times that can be difficult to work with. However, not every individual is the same with their barriers. Some might not have any barriers at all, while others might have a couple different types of communication barriers. So some of the examples are going to be on the next page. So some examples of communication barriers. Language barrier. So that would be someone that speaks a different language. Information overload. That would be giving somebody too much information to process and they don't have the availability to do so. So kind of like this training, I wouldn't be able to just dump all of this information in someone's lap and expect them to know exactly what I'm talking about. Over talking. So that means completing someone else's sentence, or not allowing them that processing time and time to come up with their own responses. Physical barriers such as hearing loss or deaf. Physiological barriers. This is things that we can't see. So thoughts and emotions and things that are going on in someone's head. Maybe their inner self-talk, or whatever they might be going through at the time. So that can be a barrier for us. Emotional barrier. Sometimes people have barriers with their emotions. They tend to either not be able to regulate their emotions, or they act out their emotions, or sometimes in cases with people that have autism, they tend to have different emotions than you and I. So they might be smiling when they're actually sad. Their responses are a little bit different. Attention deficit, so again, losing that focus, not being able to focus on more than one thing. Differences in viewpoint and perspective. Going back to our executive functioning, we did learn that people with an intellectual disability do have a difficulty with that executive functioning skill in viewpoint and perspective. So when you're working with somebody with an intellectual disability or a dual diagnosis, you need to keep that in mind, that sometimes what they're viewing and their perspective of what is going on might not be the same as you and I. And then cultural differences. So let's say that they are a practicing Muslim. That would be a different culture for us. And so that would be a cultural differences, and that might have some communication barriers to it. So some communication tips. Simplify your communication. Simplify what you're saying to them. Avoid using jargon. We don't want to use any slang terms that maybe they wouldn't understand. Use concrete language instead of abstract language. So I like this one. This one's a little bit confusing when you first read it because if you don't know what concrete and abstract is. But concrete means black and white, right? So it is exactly what you mean. Abstract is more of the gray area. It's the metaphors and the beating around the bush, so to speak. So the example I always give could be beating around the bush, but I'm not going to give that one. It's actually going to be the term fed up. I've had it up to here. Those two are confusing to somebody that doesn't understand abstract language. So you have to be very clear on what you actually mean. So concrete language would be something like, I am going to leave because I can't take any more talking right now. Instead of saying, I've had it up to here, and putting your hand up by your head. That's the difference. Don't shout. Listen intently. Clear expectations are essential. Whenever I go into someone's home and I first meet them for the first time, I try to have clear expectations with them. Hey, today we're going to be working on this. It's going to take about this amount of time, and all I need from you is XYZ. Ensure understanding of what is being said, and that's on both sides. You want to make sure that you understand what they're saying to you, and you want to make sure that they understand what you're saying to them. Avoid interrupting. Ask for clarification if you do not understand, and complete one topic or goal before moving on. More communication tips. We want to remember to treat others as you would want to be treated. Use gestures to help convey whatever message you're trying to get across. Listen to what they're saying and wait for them to finish. And it might take a while, it might feel a little awkward, but it's worth it. Another thing to keep in mind is that some people do learn visually, so you could take pictures or show pictures of what you're trying to say.